Okay, so these are the 4 processes that are the most important ones in the nitrogen cycle. And we're going to look at each one of them just very briefly. We're going to look at what the process is, what carries it out, what type of bacteria, what is converted into the product, and lastly, whether it needs oxygen or not. So the main thing to remember is that plants can only really take in nitrates. They can only use nitrates. Now if we look over here, nitrate is NO3. Now in biology you don't need to learn that, but it helps you make sense. In the air we've got a lot of nitrogen gas. You might remember nitrogen gas is N2. So if we want to convert nitrogen gas into nitrate, what do we need? We need oxygen. So that's an aerobic process. Whenever organisms excrete, in your urine, there's a substance called urea, which is a type of ammonium product. Now, ammonia is NH3, ammonium NH4. There are bacteria in the soil which will decompose the proteins in dead organisms, dead plants and animals, and will convert it into ammonia. There's ammonia from waste products, excretory products, urine and so on, and the decomposing bacteria will convert that eventually into nitrate. And again, that needs oxygen. You can see obviously you need to add oxygen to that to make nitrate. So nitrate is what plants take up, and you looked at how plants take nitrates up by active transport into the root hair cells. Now if we go back to this table, we've got these processes here. So nitrogen fixation, the name of the bacteria is easy, nitrogen fixing bacteria. These bacteria take nitrogen gas in the air and convert it to nitrates. Now, these bacteria, some of them just live in the air spaces in the soil, but a lot of them live in special root nodules, little sort of ball-shaped structures in the roots of things like peas and clover and beans. And those vegetables are called leguminous plants or legumes. And so sometimes farmers will plant clover in a field of grass just to get those bacteria in the soil and to get the clover making lots of nitrates. And then whenever the clover's plowed in to the ground at the end of the season, that soil is very rich in nitrates, and that will help the crop to grow. So nitrogen gas into nitrates, well, to make NO3 you need to add oxygen to the nitrogen, so that's obviously an aerobic process. Nitrification is the one where ammonia is converted into nitrates. So the ammonia from sort of waste products and so on, converted into nitrates, and again that's going to need oxygen. Denitrification is the process that farmers don't want to happen, because denitrifying bacteria convert nitrates into nitrogen gas. Now nitrates are what the farmer wants to have in the soil, so if these bacteria get to work on the nitrates, basically they break it down and release the gas into the air. Nitrogen gas is inert. It means it's unreactive. We take it in whenever we breathe, but we don't use it for anything. We just breathe it straight out again. And plants are the same. They don't take it in. They don't use it for anything. Nitrogen gas, as it is useless. But these bacteria really are the farmer's enemy, because if he's got soil that's got lots of nitrates in it, and these bacteria thrive in anaerobic conditions. So if his soil is anaerobic, and we'll talk about how that might happen later, these bacteria are going to break down the nitrates. So the nitrate level will drop and his plants will stop growing. At the bottom there we've got the decomposers, bacteria and fungi. So decomposition breaks down proteins. So that'll be proteins in dead plants and animals. So leaves or grass that's lying on the ground gets into the soil. These bacteria will break down the proteins into amino acids and then into ammonia. And then again, that's an aerobic process. So if we think about that, and perhaps if you get that page out of your notes and have a look at it. Keep that there. If we look at this idea, so we're saying that we've got nitrogen gas in the atmosphere, but it's pretty useless there. There will be nitrates in the soil. We want to get those nitrates into plants to make amino acids and then proteins for growth. Whoops. So basically the plants have to take it up by active uptake. So that would be the process you would put there. How do the amino acids and proteins get from plants to animals? Well, when the animals eat the grass, the plants, they take in the proteins, break it down, build it up into new amino acids and proteins. When these organisms die, or when the animals excrete, we get amino acids and proteins in the decomposers. Whenever the decomposers feed on the dead plants and animals, that's how it gets in there. And then decomposers feed on them, produce ammonia, or when the animals excrete, we get ammonia, and then we need nitrifying bacteria to change ammonia into nitrates. So we've got active uptake, feeding, death and excretion and so on, decay, giving us our ammonia, nitrification, making nitrates, and we're back to the start again. This bit here we haven't talked about. We've said that nitrogen gas is unreactive, it's inert, but the nitrogen fixing bacteria that live in the soil or live in the root nodules of the leguminous plants can convert it into nitrates and the plants can take it up. We've said if conditions are anaerobic, that's when we've got a problem, because the denitrifying bacteria will change the nitrates into nitrogen gas and then it's useless. Now the diagram you have, that's just adding the bacteria there. Diagram you have looks like that. So I'm going to look at it over here. Let's see if I can get my camera balanced here so you can see. Take a bit of maneuvering. Okay. So it's the same processes. If we start off with, we've got nitrates in the soil. How do they get up into the plants? Well, the plants absorb nitrates. I'm going to add in there by active uptake. And the plants use the nitrates to make amino acids and then proteins for growth. So we've got the proteins in the plants. When the cow eats the grass, then the cow gets the proteins and can build it up into new proteins in its body. When it dies, we've got death and decomposition. Decomposers will make ammonia. Also, whenever the animal excretes, we get ammonia products. So the next stage is ammonia to nitrates. And if you look at your table, starting with ammonia going to nitrates, we're talking about nitrification. And obviously that's carried out by the nitrifying bacteria. We've got nitrogen gas in the air as well. So we've got a cycle going on there. Nitrogen gas in the air. We said that there are swellings or root nodules in the clover and peas and beans. They've got these nitrogen fixing bacteria. So I'm just going to write N fixing for short. And the process is nitrogen fixation. Okay, so if you're a farmer, you want to grow your crops either for harvesting or you want to grow your grass to feed your cattle, your sheep, whatever your animals are. So you want to have lots of nitrates in the soil. So you want the conditions that will allow active uptake to take place, which remember needs energy. It gets the energy from respiration, and for respiration there needs to be oxygen. So we need oxygen for that. We need oxygen for this process of nitrification, making the nitrates, and we need oxygen for nitrogen fixation. So the farmer wants to make sure that his or her soil has lots of oxygen in it, so that these bacteria and the decomposers as well can make these substances so that the plants can take up a lot of nitrates and then make amino acids and then proteins and then grow more. The more oxygen, the more nitrates, the more growth, and therefore the more profit that the farmer will make. This process over here is taking nitrates in the soil, and I suppose really this line should be continued on up here. Taking the nitrates and converting them into nitrogen gas. So this here is what you don't want to happen. And if you look back at your table, you should remember that these are denitrifying bacteria. They're breaking the nitrates down, releasing the useless nitrogen gas, and the process is denitrification. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. That happens when conditions are anaerobic. Okay. These other conditions all need oxygen. In other words, they need aerobic conditions in the soil. So if we think about a farmer and his or her soil, let me see, I had a nice picture on the computer. I'll see if I can bring it up here. Yep, okay. So I think rather than move my camera, I'll just draw or try and sketch what soil looks like. So soil, if you dig down, your top soil has got lots of rock particles. And rock particles that are bound together by humus. Humus is the dead, decaying plant and animal material, so rotting leaves and rotting, decomposing animals and so on. So if you've got soil, there will be spaces in between your soils, and those are air spaces. Air spaces hopefully will have lots of oxygen in them. They'll have a bit of moisture as well. So now I don't have a blue pen, so there'll be little bits of molecules of water in there, but most of that will be filled with air. So that's what a good soil would look like. If you have a soil that is very clay, that means it's got lots of clay particles and lots of smaller particles. And basically, if it rains, the rain tends to get trapped. So if this is the rain, if it rains and your soil gets flooded, there's no oxygen. So all the air spaces have been filled with water. There's nowhere for the water to drain. And so that soil, because it's waterlogged, means that the conditions are anaerobic. So waterlogged soil, you're going to get anaerobic conditions, which are going to be perfect for these denitrifying bacteria to break down the nitrates and release the gas. And again, that's what you don't want to happen. So how do farmers make sure that their soil doesn't get waterlogged? Well, they make sure that it's well drained. And so farmers might have to put in drainage channels, make sure that the drainage channels are good, make sure that when it does rain, that there is somewhere for the water to flow to, and that it just trickles through here. It doesn't get sort of blocked and kept in there. Another problem is sometimes if you've got a lot of machinery driving over fields, the soil gets compacted. So you've still got the same particles there, but they all sort of get squeezed down one on top of the other. And as you can see there, there's very little space for any air. And so those conditions have very little oxygen, and some of the places will actually be anaerobic. So again, compacted soil, waterlogged soil are not good. Now, so compacted, oh whoops, just realised you can't see that. So the compacted soil, the particles have been sort of squashed down, heavy machinery, tractors and so on, going over the field, squashing the soil down, the air gets squashed out of it and it becomes pretty anaerobic. So how would a farmer cope with that? Well, basically they would get their tractor out and they would plough the field, break the soil up, get the air back into it. So we're looking at a few things here. Just to tie that together, we're saying we don't want this process to happen. We don't want anaerobic conditions, but instead we want this and this and this to happen. So we need lots of oxygen in our soil. So as a farmer, good conditions, bad conditions. Well, the good conditions, the soil is well aerated, and that's good because it allows nitrification, which makes nitrates. It allows nitrogen fixation to occur, again, which makes nitrates, and it allows decomposition and decay to occur. So decomposition makes ammonia, denitrification converts the ammonia into nitrates, which is what the plants need. Nitrogen fixing takes the nitrogen gas and converts it into nitrates. So all of those processes are helping to make nitrates. So how do we get a well aerated soil? It needs to have good drainage. So if it said, how would a farmer improve his soil? Improve the drainage or put in drainage channels and maybe plough it to break up the soil to introduce more air. Also, we said that some farmers will plant leguminous plants. So clover is a good example. Sometimes the farmer's planting a field of grass for grazing, he'll plant clover in with it. So the clover will contain the root nodules that contain the nitrogen fixing bacteria to make lots of nitrates. Bad soil, on the other hand, is one that is anaerobic. So that one would be aerobic. Anaerobic. In other words, lack of oxygen. What it allows to happen is denitrification, breaking down the nitrates and releasing nitrogen gas, which is useless. So it's really the opposite here. Soil that's easily waterlogged or soil that's compacted. So if you get a question telling you that you've got waterlogged soil or soil that's been compacted, it's a problem. The conditions are anaerobic. That allows denitrification to happen. It prevents these processes from happening. Therefore, there's a lack of nitrates and the plants don't grow. If the soil was to be waterlogged for a long period of time, they would die. And the same with if it was compacted for a long period of time, they would die. So how do we go from this to this? We put in drainage channels, we plough the soil, we plant leguminous plants. So hopefully that makes sense, and that should help you answer the rest of the nitrogen cycle questions in the past paper question booklet. If you have any questions, drop me a message or an email or put a comment on the post, but hopefully this has helped you understand it. Okay, bye.